Welcome to the Hard Hat Training Series. We have just a few minutes to cover the ins and outs of the required pre-shift or pre-trip inspection, so I want to get right down to the point. I know these inspections can at times seem pointless, monotonous, repetitive, or even a waste of time. I've seen a lot of operators whip through them without really paying attention, more out of habit than anything. I've also seen even more skip them altogether. But the reality is, inspections are required of you daily because every day brings with it the potential for accident. That's the life of those working on or around heavy equipment. So under no circumstances should you skip or skimp when it comes to consistently and thoroughly inspecting your equipment prior to use. Inspections are preventative in nature, meaning if you do them right, they will prevent accidents from happening. They might even save your life or the lives of those you work with. Case in point, recently a worker was killed while opening a manhole cover when he was, without warning, backed over by a front-end loader. And how did this happen? There are always a lot of little things that lead up to big accidents. But in this particular instance, investigators found a couple key things specific to our topic today. 1, the backup alarm was not working, and 2, the operator had not performed a pre-shift inspection. The lack of these two oversights, among others, cost a man his life. To help you avoid instances like this, we will be walking you through how to do a pre-shift inspection, what to look for, and what to do if you find something wrong. Of course, like any task, before you begin, you need to make sure you have the appropriate gear for the job. Most often that entails PPE, like a hard hat, safety glasses, gloves, and steel-toed boots. If you're working around other equipment that is coming and going, you will want to have a high visibility vest too, or you'll want to mark off the area. You may also want or need things like ear protection or a mask to prevent the inhalation of dust or any other harmful substances. Still, other items will be helpful. I've laid them out on the table here. These items include a flashlight so you can better see hoses and wiring, a wire brush to brush away any rust or dirt or other buildup, a piece of cardboard which we'll discuss later, and of course a clipboard with an inspection checklist to properly record your observations. Doing the inspections ultimately means very little if you don't report your findings and act on them accordingly. You will also want to make sure that you have the operator's manual handy and that any maintenance labels are readily available and legible. These are vital because they often have in them the list of things you need to check, as well as the manufacturer's recommendations for routine maintenance. With that in mind, let's get down to the list. We're going to start with what is commonly called our key-off checks, meaning these are things we can inspect without the equipment running. From there, we will move on to key-on checks, where we can inspect the operational functionality of the loader. Let's begin on the ground as we walk around looking at the exterior of the machine. The tires are often the easiest place to start. Check them over thoroughly. For the most part, you're looking for any signs of wear or damage that could affect performance and stability. This may include, but is not limited to, sufficient tread for the terrain, cuts or gouges in the rubber, embedded foreign material like rocks or rebar, missing bolts and nuts, cracked welds, leaks in the final drive, and underinflation. Make sure your inspection also covers the inside of the wheel, paying particular attention to the axles. Take the time to clear away any built-up dirt so that you can see things more clearly. Welds cover the chassis and body of the loader from the front to back, top to bottom. You don't need to spend a ton of time here. You're basically looking for anything that jumps out as you as a serious or potentially serious crack. As needed, take the time to brush away any dirt or rust in order to properly assess the integrity of the weld. We recently investigated an incident where a crane snapped at the base and came crashing down due to stress cracks along the base that had not been properly addressed over time. To make matters worse, the owners of the crane were aware of the cracks but had covered them up with fresh coats of paint. While you're not inspecting a crane today, the same principle holds true. Aside from the welds, look the body over for any damage that will hinder loader operations. The hydraulic components of your machine are vital to smooth, efficient, and safe operations. And yet we see a lot of machines where these components are not properly cared for. Visually speaking, you're looking for scratches, bends, or other damage that might prevent them from opening and closing as intended. The couplers should be fastened on correctly and free from leaks. The hoses need to be checked for leaks too, but if you see signs of leaking fluids, don't just place your hand back there. Even if you have a pinhole-sized leak, the extreme pressure in these hoses is enough to send that fluid stream right through your skin, leading to extensive tissue damage and sometimes the complete loss of a finger, hand, or limb. As mentioned earlier, for this reason you will want to use a piece of cardboard or a clipboard. Just stick it behind the hose and then check it for any signs of leaking. As we move on to the hitch area, consider turning the machine a little to open it up and give yourself more room to see and work in there as needed. You're going to be looking for many of the same potential issues. This is a case where you might want to use a flashlight in order to get a more accurate and focused look at the internal hoses and wiring harnesses. Check the hitch pin and steering cylinders for greasing as well. Check the transmission oil to make sure levels are sufficient and the system is free of leaks. It's not uncommon to see a machine with labels that are covered by mud, damaged or worn to the point of illegibility, or missing entirely. It's easy to overlook replacing these labels, yet the standards require it. They're there for a reason, to warn against common hazards. And from a liability standpoint, imagine someone puts their hand down on a component and burns themselves, only to find out there was a missing label warning against it. There is liability there that won't go unnoticed by the investigation or courts if it comes to that. Best practice is to avoid any mishaps by quickly replacing labels. A quick call to the manufacturer will usually do the trick. This goes for capacity and maintenance labels too. The steps and handrails may seem of little consequence, but it's fairly common to see them missing or damaged. As a result, it's equally common to see operators extending a little more effort or bending back into uncomfortable, unstable positions to reach the next step and get up into the machine. Because slips, trips, and falls are a common catalyst for workplace accidents, that damaged first step or handrail should really be repaired. While you're at it, clean off any buildup first. It might be hiding weaknesses or damage on the components. The lift arms and linkage need to be inspected thoroughly as well. Make sure there are no seized pins or areas lacking lubrication and that the overall structural integrity is still reliable. If more grease is needed, clean the area well and then add grease according to the manufacturer's guidelines. Too little naturally causes excessive wear, but too much can result in energy loss, accelerated wear, and component failure. Because of the wear and tear attachments undergo daily, you'll want to pay particular attention to these. The bucket, of course, is the most common, so check the cutting edge and the hardware that attaches it. Check the quarter guards, pins, and if your bucket has them, any adapters and teeth. If not addressed early on, damage here could lead to greater damage to the machine. One thing to note: while we're not inspecting the tire pressure, if you see the front edge tip up off the ground when it should be flush against it, that may be a sign of underinflation. The maintenance schedule in your operator's manual will guide you through checking the engine compartment. Sometimes you'll see labels affixed to the inside door of this same compartment. These come with places where you can sign a date signifying that you've completed the inspection and required maintenance. You don't have to use them, but everyone on site should be on the same page. Too often we see maintenance labels that are partially filled out with 1 or 2 entries. As an inspector, it's hard to know then if these important inspections have been done at all since the last date. If you don't use them, make sure you keep some sort of record. Everyone should know where to access it and how to fill it out properly. The term ROPS stands for Rollover Protection Structure and FOPS for Falling Object Protective Structure. These systems are in place to protect you in case of an accident, and there are strict standards governing their structural integrity. If your ROPS or FOPS have been compromised by way of a rollover or some other incident, then the machine shouldn't be used until it can be further inspected and approved by an engineer or appropriately fixed. There are several lights on a typical loader, and they each have a specific purpose to increase visibility and extend vision during darkness or inclement weather. Missing or broken lights are common, but the standards require you to change them out. Don't chance having an accident because you couldn't see clearly. Not long ago, a worker was run over by a loader when the operator suddenly reversed. The lights were broken, as was the backup alarm, and the operator didn't look behind him to see if he was clear to back up. If your machine has a fire extinguisher in a designated box on the outside of the cab, make sure you can access it as needed. Of course, they should be in working condition and tested according to the standard. When you're trying to put out a fire, it is not the time to discover that the extinguisher isn't working or that you need a key to unlock it. Now let's take a look inside the cab, and while we're there, we'll perform our KeON checks. These are all about testing the functionality to make sure the machine does what it's supposed to do. It's as simple as that. Of course, before moving into the cab, you want to make sure that you use 3 points of contact to get inside. The cab should not look like your childhood closet. While it's common to see tools, trash, window cleaner, drink bottles, and even fire extinguishers spread across the floor, these things need to be stowed properly so as not to distract or impede pedal operations. Because you are working in dusty conditions, filters should be checked and replaced regularly. The inner cab filters tend to be ignored most often, meaning that they're not doing their job and the air inside the cab is not as comfortable nor as safe as it should be. Make sure the seat is in good condition and can be easily adjusted to fit your needs. MSDs or musculoskeletal disorders are considered the single largest category of workplace injuries and lost work time. So it's important you take care of your back by making sure the seat is not falling apart. The operator's manual is required to be on the machine and in a legible condition. Every operator should have read it and be familiar with the contents, especially the section relating to hazards and safe operations. The seatbelt is a device designed to save your life. If it's tearing or unable to lock in properly, it needs to be replaced. Some belts actually expire after a period of time, so you want to be aware of any upcoming expiration dates. Just pull it out and check the tag on the side to know for sure. Like the exterior labels, warning labels on the inside are important and need to be replaced if missing or if the message or safety principle is no longer clear. As mentioned, the fire extinguisher needs to be in good working condition, tested appropriately, and affixed to the wall or in a designated box. Generally speaking, the instrument panel should be properly labeled. You need to know what each dial, button, or control does. You also need to take a moment to make sure these function as designed. Heaters and air conditioning are vital when working in hot or cold conditions. If they're not working, get them fixed instead of adding layers or keeping the door open for additional airflow. Keep the glass and mirrors clean. Your ability to see clearly and instantly detect if there is something wrong could be the difference between a safe workplace and one prone to accidents. Recently, we were made aware of an accident where the glare caused by the sun shining through an unclean window blinded the operator just long enough that he hit another vehicle. Turn the right and left turn signal on and off to make sure they're working. Test the horns that you can use it to warn other vehicles or pedestrians of your presence. Lift arm and bucket controls too need to be properly labeled. Then go through each of them to make sure they respond without delay or other issues. This, of course, holds true for other attachments you may be using. Once they're connected, you should always test them before use. To further test the functionality of the machine, you will need to put it in motion, driving forward and backward, testing the steering, the response time, the throttle and brakes, as well as the backup alarm. As alluded to at the outset of this video, the backup alarm must be operational and loud enough for others to hear. The parking brake or P brake also needs to be tested and proven to be in proper working order. And that's all there is to it. It doesn't have to be overly extensive. In fact, if you're doing them often and maintaining the machine or addressing issues as required, then your walk-around inspection becomes just that, a fairly quick walk-around. In all cases, if you find damage, record it and report it. If it poses a threat to safe operations, lock and tag out the machine. Find another one to use or suspend operations until the one you need is fixed. Too often we see operators justifying small issues in order to get the job done now. We understand the importance of time and efficiency and deadlines and money, but at the end of the day, these things pale in comparison to someone's health and well-being, and certainly their life. Remember, it's often several small issues that have been overlooked over time that collectively lead to one big accident. The pre-shift inspection is designed and required for the sole purpose of helping you discover and address those small issues so you can get your job done safely. Good luck and stay safe.